All right, guys, we are back for episode 17 of the Grande Archive. Today we got Damon Woodward, aka House Flip Legend, aka Big D. He's going to be coming on today. He's got a really cool story. This man just bought 4 houses in a month. So people who think you can't do that, he's going to be breaking all those myths. He's going to be talking about doing 30,000 in 1 month in sales commission. We're going to be talking high income skills. We're going to be talking capital raising, negotiation, Yahoo Finance top 20 real estate investors to keep an eye out for. This man is just on fire lately, and I know it's been a while since we've done real estate discussions. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on our guest for today, Mr. Damon.
Hello.
There we go.
How you doing?
Glad to have you on the show, my friend.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, brother. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I know it's been a while since we've chatted, and it's been a while that I've done like a real estate video. So to kind of bring some momentum behind this series, we're going to start with Damon. You want to just start off by letting people know who is Damon? How'd you get your start in real estate / business? And yeah, let's just kind of flow with that.
Most definitely. So as Manzoor mentioned, I'm Damon Woodward. I started out many years ago. I used to work in the mining industry before I went into real estate investing and sales. So I was working in a copper mine that was back just outside of Vancouver, British Columbia. I'm living here in Manitoba now, Winnipeg, Manitoba. But go back a couple of years ago, working in mining, and I started in that position as sort of like a laborer. It was like very heavy industry, like labor position. You're not really thinking much or shoveling a lot, just doing a bunch of like kind of lower leverage stuff, but it was fairly good income. Even back then I was fairly ambitious. So what I ended up doing, there's a whole bunch of different circuits in the mining industry, at least the copper mining industry that I was in. Bunch of different circuits, bunch of different levels. You go up a level, you get more money. You go up another level, you get more money, more skills, kind of like so what I ended up doing was super ambitious. I ended up climbing up all the circuits very quickly. I was spending tons of overtime, tons of extra hours. I was making pretty good money, even though my hourly wage was fairly low, simply because of just sheer man hours. So climbed up the ladder, pretty quickly there. A couple of years in, I was doing that for about 7 years in mining. A couple of years in, I found myself being sort of in the top tier position. I was operating the plant control room, which is essentially one room. I sat in a room, a dozen computers, dozens of screens, cameras, controlling everything about the production of this entire operation, essentially. Big operation. It was a fairly high-paced position, very specialized. It's a $500 million mine, essentially, and I ran everything, one guy from the control room. I had
how many staff would you think? Like, how many people were in there?
There's a few hundred in the building I was in itself. There was probably like 40 or 50 staff, but the operation had, I think, 450 or 500. Keep in mind, I wasn't running everything of all those employees. I was running the production. Keep in mind, the entire operation, that's what it is. It's production. Like, it's a copper mine. A lot of responsibility. I still had bosses, of course, but it was very specialized. So what ended up happening, so I sort of capped out in my position. I was making very good money. I was sort of capped out. There was really nowhere else for me to go at the time. And the other thing that I was really scared of, and it kind of ties into some of the stuff that's happening in one of the industries now, like the oil industry is tanking. One of my biggest fears is that the commodities, the price of copper would drop to the point that those places would shut down. Some of the old people that I worked with back then in the mines, they've seen, 3 or 4 cycles of places closing. And I was making really good money, fairly specialized though. Like, it wouldn't really help me outside of that one building. You know what I mean? Really good money. And my biggest fear that it would close down and then I would be left with pretty much nothing to fall back on, because that was pretty much my only skill at the time, was just working in that control room. So what ended up happening is I ended up applying for an apprenticeship to go into the trades, simply because it's a lot more secure if you're going into trades, because I could pivot into other industries if anything ever happened with, let's say, for example, the copper mine or the copper, the commodities.
What trade were you looking at?
I was in millwrighting. So what I ended up doing, it's like an industrial mechanic that fixes the big mine equipment. So very big stuff. I was taking big pieces of equipment apart with cranes, piece by piece, and things like that. It's fairly dangerous, fairly hard work. And the mine, they offered to give me an apprenticeship. So they paid for me to go to trade school. So what ended up happening, I was living in Penticton, British Columbia at the time. I ended up moving to Vancouver to go to trade school, to Burnaby. The BCIT is British Columbia Institute of Technology. So I moved there to go to trade school. And what ended up happening is the very first, I guess it was the day before I started trade school. So just picture this. I was in a new city, don't know anybody, like brand new place, there for trade school. I thought I was going to go into trades and make, probably $100,000 a year forever. So I was pretty excited about the idea. Like I could pivot to industries, very secure. I wasn't relying solely on the price of copper. But anyway, so what ended up happening the day before I went to trade school, there was a seminar up the street from my campus that was for RAIN, which is the real estate network. Fairly well-known company here in Canada for real estate. It's like they do lots of market statistics and things like that. They're big on the buy and hold, income properties, all that stuff. So, a pretty cool organization actually. But they were holding a free seminar. It was a 2 or 3 long seminar, and it was right up the street from my campus. I didn't know anybody there. I didn't have a clue about anything. I was just waiting to start trade school. So I thought, okay, well, I might as well pop in and just check it out. Like it's free. It's right.
Yeah, see what's up.
See what's up. So I went in there, rolled in there. It was like only a 2 or 3 hour thing. I think the premise of the event was to sell their program. I signed up. It was like a $200 or $300 a month program for the year. But there was a guy there, and I'm going to remember this forever. His name was Richard Dolan. He's the president of RAIN, like super, just very charismatic, great salesman. I think he might be working with Grant Cardone now or something. His name's Richard Dolan. Very, very straightforward dude. So I watched him. This is the first time I'd ever been to like any kind of a seminar. Commanded the room. He was very, very charismatic. I really liked what he was saying. Very good at sales too. Like he was just selling the whole time. And I freaking was sold. You know what I mean? I just bought the thing. And after the 2 or 3 hour event, he painted the vision about real estate investing and building wealth long term and doing no money down deals and all this stuff. This was not even on my radar at all because I had never heard of that. I didn't know anybody.
Like, had you not taken that little excursion, like random adventure, you probably wouldn't be where you are today?
Definitely not. Like literally that 2 or 3 hour window of time literally changed everything for me. And so I actually, now that I kind of we're underlining that point, I actually owe a lot of this to Richard Dole. I don't really have a relationship with him, but just the couple hours that I spent with him, it just like you said, it changed everything for me. And then what ended up happening, he was such a good salesman too. At the end, I signed up for the thing. He stayed back one-on-one with me for like 35, 45 minutes after the whole rest of the people left. And keep in mind, I'm scruffy. I have a baseball cap. I'm like in my mining. Like, I was just like a random person in there. And he literally spent an extra 45 minutes with me, just kind of hanging out. He gave me a copy of one of his books that he wrote. He used to be an investment banker, I think it was, before he went into doing what he's doing now. So signed the thing for me. So it just made me feel really good about the situation. Like, I bought his thing and I felt amazing about it. Like, that's how you kind of know. So I walked out of that meeting, and literally it was just like my mind was completely blown. Because when I walked in, I was like, okay, trades, 100,000, kind of middle class, like it's hard work. I'm probably not like a retirement, like I'm putting a little bit of money. Like that's kind of like the mining path. And then now all of a sudden I got the, like this big shock of like, there's so much more that's available out there for anybody that spends a little bit of time just learning some of these other concepts. So again, that's sort of how I ended up getting interested initially. Then what I ended up doing, so in trade school, I was like, okay, well, I better look into this. I started trade school. I'm like, I think I want to dive a little bit deeper into the real estate investing space here, because 2 or 3 hours worth of stuff, I was already like, wow, like how do I get some more stuff in? I ended up
that's the thing with real estate investing, right? It's kind of like this golden unicorn, especially when it's presented in such a manner like work from home, passive income, freedom, and this kind of stuff, But continue. So you were saying you kind of caught the bug.
I caught the bug bad. Like I had the bug. It was contagious too. I was like, how do I get more of this coming in? I was like already addicted to like it. I never even did a deal yet, anything. I was already hooked. They hooked me in pretty good. So what I ended up doing is I started buying some other seminars. There were some smaller ones, like $2,000 thing for a weekend seminar. You know, there's tons of them available. Lots of them in my opinion aren't super great, but even if they're not put together that well, the networking, like you're still bringing stuff that's positive in. So I started taking.
You might just get like one of those little info nuggets out of that, right? But
definitely.
We'll circle back to the power of seminars a bit later in the episode.
Definitely, yeah. So it was really good. Eventually, I ended up buying a fairly large coaching program because one of the seminars, of course, they're all sales seminars. You know, sales. They're trying to sell their next thing. There's multiple years. So I jumped in right away to another one. It was a fairly large investment. And keep in mind, I was making good money, but it was like paycheck to paycheck. I didn't have any savings. So I ended up going in and started taking on debt to get some real estate coaching. And I think, remembering correctly, I think it was about a $30,000 coaching program that I took with that. So that was what really first exposed me to like the space and the different strategies. I ended up looking initially at the rent to own strategy, simply because in that program that I took, there was a program, I think it was called Momentum, which was sort of an introduction into all the different strategies, you know, flipping, buy and hold, rent to own, wholesaling, like all the different ones. They give you a little bit of information on each. And then the purpose of it was then you're going to pick one. Me still being brand new off the street, rent to own sounded the best to me at the time, which it is a very, very strong strategy. I'm flipping houses now. I'm not doing rent to own, but at the time, rent to own is the one that I chose. So I ended up flying around. I went to they have symposiums every couple of 6 months with that company. So flew around, went to a bunch of symposiums, started meeting people, networking, learning a little bit more about investing. And I ended up doubling down even more and started following a guy online. I know you know our guy, Stefan Arnio.
Hey, shout out Stefan.
Shout out to Stefan Arnio, my friend. He's pretty much the reason why all this ended up, you know, coming together for me at the end. Keep in mind, all the other stuff was really, really good as well. But he was sort of the cherry on the top that really made it pop for me. So I ended up following a guy online, Stefan Arnio. Didn't really know too much about him. I was still working in mining. Now I was in trades and all these different things. And I saw that he was putting on a seminar here in Winnipeg it was called Your Best Self, which was a mindset program. It was all about mindset.
Were you in Winnipeg already at this time?
No, I was still in BC, so I was still in Vancouver at the time. So I started following a little bit. I happened to be on days off during his seminar. I think I paid a few $1,000. I flew from Vancouver out here to Winnipeg to attend it was a 2-day event. And then being in the environment and just seeing Stefan in person and kind of same thing, he's very, very good. He has, I'm sure we'll dive a little bit deeper into some of this a little bit later. But what happened there is we had a VIP dinner, and I had an opportunity to chat with some of his current students that were there for the seminar. Okay. So one-on-one, you know, a little more networking. Every single student that I spoke with at this course, they were all actively doing deals. They were flipping properties, actively doing deals. Like literally every single one of them they were doing their first deal at least, or several. And this wasn't something that I just saw online. Like I flew to Winnipeg, I talked to them in person. Like they're giving me details of all the stuff. Yeah. So right there, that kind of did it for me. It was enough sort of the proof of his concept and model that I ended up signing up for one of his coaching programs. He has a company that I work with him now, and we do real estate education and training. So I ended up signing up for one of his coaching packages, and that's when I pivoted in a little bit away from the rent to own, and that's when I dove very heavily into flipping properties, was because the program that he has is designed a little bit more towards flipping.
So I want to ask you, while we're kind of on this topic, so for people who don't know what rent to own is, right? Because it's a bit of a niche term. Yeah. And especially when you're talking about investing, right? People understand flipping a house, like you're going to buy the house, you're going to paint it, you're going to sell it, right? You want to kind of explain what rent to own means for the people who don't know?
Definitely. So rent to own is a pretty good strategy. There's a lot of people out there that want to purchase a property, but they either they don't really have a good enough credit yet. Maybe they have tarnished credit, or maybe they're self-employed or something, or they don't have a full deposit to be able to put, 5 or 10% down onto a piece of property. So the rent to own program, people can come in and I won't dive too deep into what it all is, the details, but somebody can come in, they can essentially rent them the house with the option, they give them the option to purchase the house from them in a designated amount of time. It's like a 2 to 3, 4 year term, like 3 is pretty popular. And then what happens is it's sort of like a forced savings program. And it's also like a credit building program because you work with the people, you help them build up their credit throughout the program. You also help them build up a bit of a deposit because they give you a little extra chunk every month that you kind of keep aside. And then as soon as they're qualified a couple of years down the road for the mortgage, then they just basically take over the house and then boom, now they're kind of an owner. So they rent it from you with the intention to purchase it. And
kind of like leasing a car or financing a car, right?
There's quite a lot to it actually. Like I've heard it has a little bit of a negative stigma. There's a lot of people out there that don't really have proper training that are trying to put these things together. But when you do it properly, it's a very good situation. Like it's win-win. You know, the tenant buyer wins, the investors win, like pretty much everybody wins as long as it's executed properly. There's a lot of steps that some people will miss. Maybe they don't help them or monitor their credit throughout the process. Then at the end, they don't qualify for the mortgage or something. So like, there's ways that it doesn't work. But as long as the investor is well-trained and diligent, the courses that I took on it were very, very good. I have some friends now that are doing quite a few of these rent-to-owns, and I don't know how much they're making, but it seems to be very lucrative for them, and it's very good because people can get into home ownership.
I want to ask you, though, something about this. So you mentioned, like, if the deal is executed properly, it's a win-win, right?
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of stigma around win-win. Like, most people, especially in business, just kind of feel, I think this is kind of an outdated methodology now, but most people will be like, oh, no, for me to win, you have to lose, right? There's no such thing as a win-win in business. Do you want to kind of explain a little bit about that?
I would disagree on that for sure. I think there is a win-win. I mean, entering into a negotiation, there's certain things that if you're an effective negotiator, you can sort of figure out before you go in what you want and what you don't really want. And sometimes the thing that you want or the thing that they want is just very small. Like sometimes it's like the price of something. Sometimes it's one term or something. And sometimes you'll kind of muck up your offer a little bit, or you'll muck up the things that you want. Some of it's not even real. You start trading things. But they could win. Maybe they're getting the perfect terms and you're getting the perfect price. So in my opinion, you can definitely do a win-win. The example of a rent-to-own that the question came from is the tenant buyer. They can win because they already know exactly how much money they're putting in every month. They already know the exact amount of time the term is. They know the purchase price. Like they already know everything. So if they end up going all the way to the finish line, they own the property. You know, they've built up their credit. They've built up the deposit. And then the investors, they also win because they're getting, like, of course, they're getting paid. They're providing a really great service. They're getting paid for the service, which is just how business works. And person A wins, person B wins. Sometimes there's like a third party involved that maybe is just a home owner. Maybe there's a couple people, they're winning. Everybody can win in this thing. It just really depends on how you structure it. And having the education behind you, that really helps a lot because then you know what boxes need to be checked off from A to B so everybody can win. A lot of the time, you have to look for rent to own.
But I think this is part of the difference, though, right? Between like your style of business and somebody, let's say, who's not as ethical, right? You're kind of like actively trying to create win-win situations, right?
Definitely.
Whereas most people don't really want to spend the extra few minutes or go the extra mile to do that, right? Why do you think it's important to really create these win-win situations?
Well, I think especially because now I've been kind of very heavily involved with business for the last few years. I think a lot of it is like, don't get me wrong. If there's somebody that needs to sell, for example, a property, they need a certain price or they're going to go bankrupt and it's $100,000 less than what they could have got on the street.
Oh, I think we lost you.
On the market. And somebody can come in super quick and pay for that. How about now?
Yeah, okay, that's good. I think there was just a couple minute delay. Mind you, like we are doing this live, right? So we're bound to have a couple of connection issues and delays along the line. But yeah, so you were saying.
Yeah, you got me back now?
I got you back now.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, no, I was saying, so don't get me wrong. There can be still a win-win. If somebody needs a certain price, for example, for a house, it's $100,000 less than what they could get on the market, but they're going to go bankrupt tomorrow. If somebody can come in and buy it, is that a win-win or did somebody win and somebody lost? Like it's really sort of a perspective thing. So in my opinion, to be ethical and wanting to set up a win-win for everybody, it just really helps you a lot with your business. Like ethically, your reputation is on the line every time you do a transaction in business. And
Yeah,
it's a
limitations
small
you
world.
business.
It's a very small world, even just real estate investing as a whole. I have lots of friends from other trainings and this and that from all over the country, lots of students, lots of stuff. And it's a pretty small world. Like, you want to make sure that you're operating ethically, because that will come back around at some point and bite you. And nobody wants to work with somebody that's kind of like a, slimy, shady. And it's really easy to do that, especially when you're working with people that are distressed. It's really easy for somebody with the skills to come in and just take complete advantage. But there's a difference between being ethical and being unethical. And one of them is going to lead to a lot of money, and the other one is probably going to lead to like jail or some type of
getting extorted or kidnapped or something.
Something will happen, and you don't know, man. Like, you just don't know. So in my opinion, it's better to have to structure the win-wins as much as possible. And it's just a much better way to conduct business, in my opinion.
No, right on. Yeah, I definitely agree with that, especially because technology has made everything so transparent now.
Yeah.
Like, you can't pretend that you're not a bad person if you're a bad person. You know, like, the internet's going to catch you. You're going to get exposed. Yeah. It's going to be on Reddit.
Yeah.
There's no hiding from the eyes.
Definitely. And that's what you don't want, because your brand is everything in business. And
let's talk about this a little bit now that you've mentioned brand. How important is branding in terms of real estate, right? Because I know there's a lot of investors in Ottawa per se, right? These guys own a couple of properties, or they've been like in business generations, stuff like this, right?
Yeah.
But they don't really have a strong brand. And a lot of these people feel like, oh, well, why do I need to brand myself any more than having a logo, right?
Yeah.
You want to talk about that?
Definitely. So in my opinion, anyway, keep in mind, this is all just my own views, my own opinion. A brand, whether it be a personal brand or a brand for your business, is probably the most important thing that you can start to develop and build, because it's what's going to set you apart from everybody else that's doing the same thing that you're doing. And there's small little things that you can do to really help be a little more visible. And the people usually that are more visible in the marketplace are the ones that take the biggest share of the market. And a lot of the stuff is very small. My mentor, and coach, Stefan Arnio, he is so successful because he spent the time building a very strong brand compared to a lot of other people. There might be people doing the volume he's doing, but they're not even really in the same realm, in my opinion, again. Because
I agree with that.
And so what happens when you start to build a brand, and speaking specifically on real estate investing, because that's where a lot of my knowledge is at this moment, you'll have deals coming into you a lot more passively when you start building a brand and being visible. So you have more deal flow in passively, and then you also have more investors that come into you passively because you're a little bit more visible in the marketplace. An example of that is one of the newer investors that I'm working with right now. Like, I'm working a little bit more on branding over the last, let's say, 12 months. One of my newest investors, I'm doing a couple of real estate deals with him right now. Very strong relationship, at least the beginning of a very strong relationship. And he saw a lot of my stuff before we end up doing deals together. He just saw some of my stuff on YouTube. Watched YouTube videos. I explained some of my story. He was saying, oh, you seem really genuine in your stuff. And then, now we're doing deals. And he was sort of an inbound thing that came into my atmosphere, into my ecosystem passively, because I'm building a little bit of a brand. So in my opinion, it makes
putting yourself out there.
Definitely. And even for you right now, this is building the Manzoor brand. Like, this is like, you get it, right? So a lot of the people that are doing a ton, doesn't mean you're not successful if you don't have a brand, but especially for people that are new in the game and they want to come in, they want to have success, having the brand and being visible, how Googleable are you? Things like that. At some point, somebody's going to probably Google you. And if they don't find anything, maybe they don't want to give you a bunch of money, or, maybe the conversation will be slightly different.
I think though, so let's stop here for a second on the talk of Google, right?
Yeah.
So I know for a while there was this whole stigma, like, you don't want to show up on Google. If you're showing up on Google, you're doing something bad,
Yeah.
But I think now that, like, it's changing to the point where, like, if you meet somebody on the street, they tell you their name, the first thing you're going to do is, oh, let me Google, let me Facebook, let me find out who this person is and what do they do.
Yeah.
And if you're not the one actively posting out the content, you're not in control of what people are saying about you, right? So if you just kind of don't build a brand and now you let somebody else come in and talk about you, they can say whatever the hell they want, whether it's true or not. And there's nothing you can do about that, right? Once your reputation's gone, it's gone.
It's gone. Yeah. Yeah. So you kind of play defense.
Exactly. Well, I kind of like this too, though, how you're mentioning like you're able to like get deals now because of the videos you have, or you're getting lenders, right? I know a lot of people struggle with this whole idea. So I made a post a little while back talking about how people went out and bought like 5, 10, 20, 30 properties to put on Airbnb. Yeah. And a lot of like the feedback I got back was, what are you talking about? How could one person own 20 properties? You know? And I think the missing piece of the puzzle for most people is, how do you get money from somebody who's not a bank? And how are you getting deals without using a realtor or something, you know?
Yeah.
And I think you've kind of figured out the secret sauce to doing this. You did buy 4 houses in 1 month, right?
Yeah.
You want to kind of explain how that came about? What's that kind of entail for you? And let's see if people can kind of grasp on how they can implement the same kind of things into their life, you know?
Definitely. So especially for real estate investors, like it's helpful with other businesses, but especially real estate investing, raising capital is one of the most important skills to start to learn, because at some point even if you have a little bit of money, at some point you're going to need more money and resources. So raising capital is very, very important. One of the things that I see that holds a lot of people back from wanting to get into real estate investing is that they don't think they can raise capital. Like they don't know it can be done. They think you need to.
I feel like the biggest barrier for most people is it literally comes down to it. I don't have enough money. I don't have the down payment. I don't have credit, you know?
100%. That's one of the massive barriers. And what I did to get started without getting too deep into things, as long as you have a little bit of knowledge on like maybe have a system in place to be able to learn how to start raising capital. I don't recommend that people just go out with no training and just go start approaching potential investors and trying to like just vomit information on them, because you're probably just going to burn some of your hottest prospects, so to speak, if you're doing that. So I would recommend get a little bit of a system if you want to learn how to raise capital. How I got started with it is they were blue collar guys for the majority of my investors when I was first getting going. So keep in mind, I paid for training. I had a coach. I did the stuff. But what I did, my very first raise that I ever raised for real estate, it was a blue collar guy, somebody that I used to work with in the mining industry, paycheck to paycheck guy. I think he had some money in his equity or something. And I ended up raising about $40,000. That was my very first meeting that I ever set with a potential investor. So very first meeting, 40,000.
Wait, let's back up a little bit. So before you went to go approach this person and raise the $40,000, you took some kind of training, right? You didn't just kind of knock on his door and say, "Hey, look, this is what I'm doing. Give me your money."
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so I took the training. I learned what I know about capital raising. I learned it from Stefan Arniel. Like he used this exact same. So pretty much everything in my business that I do is the Stefan Arniel blueprint. Very proven. It's worked for him very, very well. So there's no sense to me to try to reinvent things. I just literally do exactly what he says or what he taught me. So I think I might be losing you there. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear you. So I'm kind of live streaming this from my phone as a webcam. So I think it's just like having a connection issue. I'm gonna just go behind this laptop real quick and edit that. But if you want to continue talking, go for it, bro.
Sounds good. Yeah. So anyway, so I took the training. What I ended up doing is I put some stuff together in the form of a binder. It's like a capital raising binder, which is the template that my coach used when he raised his first $5 million to get into his first several deals, his first $5 million. I did the exact same thing. I made the binder. I got all of my stuff organized. I learned the process of the pitch. There's a bit of scripts involved with it. Again, it's kind of like you're making a sale. So there's a little bit of scripting involved. There's also a series of rebuttals, just like a sale. So you kind of learn some of the rebuttals. And then every time you're raising capital from a potential investor, they're going to ask you a series of probably the exact same questions every time. You know, how does the money move? You know, what if you just run away or disappear or something? Like there's always the same question. So I got prepared beforehand with some answers for all the questions that might come up. And then it was just a matter of finding the people. So I made a list of people that I would reach out to, sort of like cold calling, even though they're kind of like in my warm circle in the beginning. And then started reaching out to people and just gauging interest on, if I have a deal lined up in the future, would you be interested to have a look? That is kind of how it was framed. So then you gauge some interest, you line up some people that are interested, you're kind of getting permission to pitch them a deal in the future. And then when you do have a deal, it's all organized, it's all set up properly. Then when you reach out to them, you already set up some of the conversation beforehand. So especially sometimes with real estate investing, distressed property, sometimes you got to move super quick. So having that conversation, having some potential investors line up beforehand is really important. So that's what I did for myself to answer your question. I set up some infrastructure, I set up some material, templates of some stuff, and then I reached out to him. He was the first meeting that I had, and I ended up, it was just almost like magic, $40,000 bucks.
Damn.
Again, in real estate investing, that's not a huge amount of money. But what it did for me,
but like, so this is the thing, is it may not be a huge amount of money in the world of real estate investing, but I think let's take that aside. Just like for somebody who's new into the world of capital raising, business, real estate, anything like this, right? That's like, for most people, they can't even comprehend that. Like you can go talk to somebody, explain to them, hey, look, this is the investment. This is what your returns will be. This is how you're going to get your money back. These are my qualifications. Are you interested? And then lo and behold, they said, yeah, let's do a deal, you know? I think people don't understand. Like, it's really just that simple, you know? How about like, so what, like, if you are now, you want to actually touch base on the difference between like capital raising and mortgages? I think that's a good topic.
Definitely.
Also, can you see me now?
I can't see you. I got the spinning wheel. I can hear you perfectly fine, though.
What's going on here? Okay, I'm going to try and restart my camera, but you want to go ahead and field that question?
Definitely. So there's a few different ways that people go about raising capital. Sometimes they can go into a bank or, you know, like some kind of other lender, and they can get a mortgage. They'll usually lend you a certain percentage of the value of the property. The way that I'm doing it, and the way that I've pretty much always done it, except for a few of my first deals, I prefer to do the all cash model. When you raise a lot more money up front. So what I'm actually doing is I'm paying cash for the property. So I don't need a bank. I don't need a hard money lender. I don't need any like kind of lenders. I just have a cash investor. And what he does is he puts down 100% of the money for the purchase, 100% of the money for the renovations, 100% of the money for the holding costs. And that's the way that I prefer to operate. You need to get fairly proficient at raising money because right now I have, what do I have? I have 8 houses on the go right now. Not all of them are all cash, but a good portion of them are all cash. So you need to have access to quite a lot of capital.
And obviously the reason you're doing all cash is so you're not stuck with a hefty mortgage payment every single month.
Yep. I just prefer it. That's what Stefan Arnio's done. That's what I'm just following the same blueprint. It's really nice. You need to raise a lot more money. But then like let's say the renovation goes longer than expected. Or let's say the market, something weird happens, like we're like in COVID right now. If something weird happens and the property takes longer to sell or something, then you're not getting eaten alive with huge mortgage payments and interest rates because sometimes people are doing equity splits or like I won't break the details of some of the things. I'm not really doing equity splits anymore. I used to. But I just really prefer it because even if it takes you longer to exit the project, you're still making the same amount of money. Your return for the investor might be slightly lower. There I see again now.
I switched my camera. I'm not sure what's going on with actual setup, so I'm just going to use my webcam for now.
Gotcha. It's so clear. Yeah. Nice. But that's just my preference because if things have to sit around a while, doesn't matter as much because you're not having like a hard money loan payments. I know a lot of people when they're getting started, they'll use hard money lenders, which is they're essentially asset-based lenders, and they'll usually lend you a certain percentage of the purchase price, and they don't care about your credit much or your income. They just lend based on the property. Those are usually pretty high interest. Like you're paying sometimes 11, 12, 13, 14, 15%.
That's not to say you still can't make money when you're borrowing at 15%, right? There are definitely people borrowing at 15, 20%, and they're still making a profit on it.
Definitely. I have hard money on 2 of my houses that I'm flipping right now. The other ones are cash. So 2 of them. The only reason is I had an investor that backed out right before I had to close on these 2. So I had to just grab hard money quickly, but it's not the common practice for me. But you can definitely make money with hard money as well. I'm just not a huge fan of it, especially because you're going to need to have a cash investor still to give you the other 25% of your purchase and your renos and all the stuff. And if anything super, catastrophic happened, you have the hard money lender that's in first position, and it probably isn't going to happen often, but there still is the downside there that if something happened and the hard money lender had to come in and repossess the asset, there's a small chance that your cash investor may not get the full return back. Maybe they could lose money or something. So you have a lot more downside. So when a lot of investors are getting started, they'll go the hard money route. They'll get hard money. Then they'll get a cash investor. They'll kind of, make a baby together, and they'll just do deals that way. But it's not super scalable, in my opinion. I prefer to just raise more money from a cash investor, have a backup plan in place just in case the thing doesn't sell, or just in case you go over budget, or just in case you have to rent it out and you have to do a refinance and pull as much of their investment out as possible. Or like there's a few different ways that I work a second exit strategy. But to answer the question, so the hard money, the all cash model is much, much better in my opinion. And it's a lot safer as well.
Yeah. But obviously you do need the education to be able to pull off something like this. This is not just for the everyday. Well, it is for the everyday person, but you need to kind of know how to do it, right?
Yeah.
I feel like once you know how to do it, anybody can do it, right? That's kind of what I feel. Right?
Definitely.
It's not like this crazy thing. Like you have to be 8 feet tall, 100 pounds. Like otherwise, it won't work for you. That's the cool thing I really like about real estate. I also like that. So you've kind of danced around this, but there's over 100 ways to make money in real estate, right? And I don't think people realize that. This is why it's one of the best asset classes, and it's been one of the best asset classes, right? Market goes up, market goes down. You're making money either way. Yeah. You want to touch base on how COVID-19 is affecting you, if it's affecting you at all? Is it really out there in Winnipeg right now?
It is. I mean, everybody's still hiding out inside right now in Winnipeg. Super good question. A lot of people are talking about COVID right now. For me personally, it's not affecting me all that much. Like I have eight properties on the go right now. The only thing that's being affected right now is some of the normal suppliers that I'm normally getting things from. I'm having to get them from elsewhere sometimes. Even something like IKEA
stuff.
Yeah, like some of the kitchens I use are from IKEA. They're still going, but the deliveries are super slow. So unless you want to wait for several weeks to get some stuff, I'm finding I'm getting materials from different suppliers. But other than that, my day-to-day operation has not really changed much. My contractors, for the most part, are all still working. I have a whole bunch of crews on different houses. They're all still working for the most part. I'm having a few of their guys are kind of not there all the time, because if they have a little bit of a cold or a little bit of something, they're kind of like just telling them to stay home. So things have slowed down for me as far as the renovation slightly, and as far as getting the materials. Other than that, I'm still looking to buy. I have a couple new deals lined up.
Are you kind of scared though, because you are in the flipping model right now, right? Or are you doing buy and holds now?
I'm doing buy and holds as well, but majority of what I'm doing is flipping. Like I'm buying a fourplex.
So the 8 properties though, like you were just talking about, those are flips, correct?
Those are flips. Yeah. One of those is a fourplex that I'm going to hold. The other 7 are flips.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But so are you kind of worried though, with COVID, do you think it's going to affect how long you're going to be stuck holding these properties, or if you're going to actually be able to sell them? And then you have a second backup plan, let's say you're not able to sell it?
Definitely. So it's something that anybody that's flipping right now, I think, needs to sort of put a lot of thought into this. The people that are flipping, we should already have a second exit strategy locked in before this happens, because even in a booming economy, not everything sells. So a lot of the stuff, some of it is minor tweaks. One of my plans with one of my investors, just to give you a general rundown of what I'm doing differently, is that we're doing the all cash model. We're going to we would, and if it goes probably 30 days, maybe 45 days past the average days on market, we're just going to implement plan B right away, second exit strategy right away. We're not going to think too much about it. That day is going to come.
What about just holding the property? Is that kind of is holding the property? If you're not able to just sell it, just turn it into a rental, is that part of your plan?
Definitely. Yeah. So what we would do is we would tenant it, refinance as much out as we can. Hopefully we can pay them right out. Keep in mind, we might not be able to pay out every penny of their initial investment on the refinance. So in situations like that, we have it agreed upon ahead of time that I'll probably up his percentage points by 1 or 2 points, and whatever money's left in, I'll just keep paying him his monthly interest on that. When we have to hold it as a rental until either it sells or we can refi it again, maybe it's 12 months. We don't really know what that looks like. So that's the exit strategy, the second exit strategy that I'm implementing. And that's how I'm setting up all of my new deals too, to make sure that that's very clear. And there's really not.
So you're still doing deals during this pandemic?
Definitely. Yeah. I'm just about
Are you getting better deals now?
I think the buy right now is extremely important as well. So the buy is extremely important. The one that I'm starting right now is going to be a build. It's a build that the person before me wasn't. I'm doing it with the joint venture partner. The person before me wasn't able to finish. So it's a really, really good deal, really good numbers, tons of margin. It's a fairly large project. So I'm still doing the all cash model for this project. Purchase price on it is $600,000. And just to give you a bit of perspective, so the purchase price on this property is $650,000, and we're buying it in cash. So no bank, no hard money, $650,000, $230,000 of renovations, all cash, boom. All the other holding costs and things is all like upfront. And then same thing, if it doesn't sell, we have the plan B already. Like, it's well discussed. We know exactly what's going on with that. The numbers that we're running, we might have to leave $100,000 in, or 140 on our worst case scenario. Might have to leave a little bit of the investment in for a while, but it's not the end of the world if we have to do that, because it's gone for.
Well, it's not like you're just like hiding cash under your mattress, right? Like, you're just leaving money in a building. It's eventually going to go back up, right? People always need a place to live.
Definitely. And there's equity on the buy as well. So there's over 150,000 equity just on the purchase of what it's currently worth right now and what we're buying it for. So
how important is that though, right? Because you hear this all the time from people. They're like, "Yo, you like buy low, sell high, blah blah blah." They don't really hear this often, that like you make all your money in the buy, right?
Yes, definitely.
You want to explain that concept for people?
100%.
You kind of just did with the 100K in equity, but let's dive in a little bit deeper.
So the model that I use, I purchase between 40 to 60 cents on the dollar. This is a fairly common model, especially if people are familiar with Stefan Arnio. This is his kind of famous model. So we buy 40 to 60 cents on the dollar, renovating it up to 70 cents on the dollar. Sometimes I will push that up to 75 cents as long as all the numbers are super tight and the rental budgets are pretty good. And then we sell it at 100. So it's always going to cost about 10 cents to sell the property. So there's always going to be 20 cents on the dollar, or 20% of the sale price is going to be profit. So at the end of the deal, there should be 20% of equity from the resale price to what you're in it for. So that's a bit of a cushion. This fits the exact same model, this larger build that we're finishing. So it fits the exact same model. That's super important because I see a lot of people, especially out west when I was still in Vancouver, a lot of people, they haven't spent the money for the training. They don't really know how to find the discounts. Keep in mind, in their defense, it's a lot harder out in places out west to find the deals. You have to go off market more. But
I'll find in Ottawa though.
Yeah, it's pretty much, you're kind of living it too right now. So kind of the same thing. Sometimes I'll see people purchase properties for like 80 cents on the dollar out west. And I'm just thinking, like, how are you making money on that? Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're doing some of the work. They're trying to pull out $10,000 or $15,000 of profit by doing a townhouse that was like maybe $600,000 or $700K or something on the sale. To me, that's just super, super rich.
But like, this is the thing. Somebody like that, do you even consider them an investor? Because so like from where I'm sitting, there's so many people right now, especially in Ottawa, who are like, I am a real estate investor. They flipped maybe 1 or 2 houses, let's say 10 houses, right? Yeah. But like they've really just kind of got lucky along the way. They've been kind of riding out this wave because the market's just increasing, right?
Yeah.
And they don't actually have any training. They're not prepared to deal with this. So now let's say they bought a house for like 700K, but COVID doesn't leave anytime soon. They're stuck with it. Now it's worth 200K, right? Yeah. So for me, in my opinion, most of the people you're going to find in these hot markets aren't even investors. They're just speculators. Somebody who saw like a movie or something on HGTV and like, yeah, I could do this. And then they get burned. And then the people like Damon come in and like, oh, you got 100K in equity. Let me just take this deal off your hands, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's very important as well, because without somebody to purchase it from them, like they're going to be in that spot. So it's just sort of how the world works. What I find is the people, like really the only difference between what I'm doing right now and those people that are just sort of more hobby, like I still consider them to be investors. Like they're just sort of, you know, dealing with what they have because they don't know there's other stuff, just because they don't have the education. Really the only difference between what I'm doing right now and what those people, like those kind of investors, are doing is that I've just simply put in more training. I've spent more money on more coaching and more things, and I'm learning more skills, and I've been putting money in. So I've been doubling down on education heavy for a couple of years. I've spent over $100,000 in 2 years on myself, basically.
If I had a gong like Stefan, I would have given you a gong right now.
Definitely. And Stefan Arnio, he's played a major part in all this stuff. Like, he's just like, I won't spend too much time, like, you know, praising him, but you know, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be around doing what I'm doing now. But the point that I made,
probably wouldn't be doing this show, to be honest.
100%. Yeah. So he's made a huge impact on what I'm doing. But to go back to our topic, is that I've just simply put in more. You know, the people that aren't getting results and they're not making less money.
Let me ask you this, right? Like, why is it that you were willing to spend $100,000 in like real estate education, right? And it's not like you just went and gave $100,000 one shot, right? I'm assuming you did this seminar, you went here, you tried this, you tried this, you tried this, right?
Yeah.
Why are you doing that? And why should people really be doing that?
So one of the biggest eye-opening things that has happened since I've been going through this journey, and keep in mind, I've only been seriously investing a few years. It's not like I'm a seasoned vet that I haven't been doing this for 10 years. I did my first training at the end of 2017 or something. You know what I mean? It's been a few years.
You started in 2017, but you are now on Yahoo Finance list for top 20 investors to watch.
Yeah.
So people, this is not rocket science, right? This guy's making major waves in the span of a few years, right?
Yeah.
So if you're willing to commit to something, you can definitely achieve this. But yeah, continue what you were saying.
100%, man. Yeah, I appreciate it. So what I did, so for the first one, the program I think I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the show was about 30 grand. So I threw that down like in one shot. I was sort of taking a leap. You know, I knew that real estate was what I wanted to do, so I threw it down. I went through that program, met some really good people, like good networking. I didn't do any deals with that program. Keep in mind, I still got a ton of value simply because I met some really good people. And a lot of my power team out west in Vancouver that I still use were connected to me through that network. So even though I didn't do deals with it, I wouldn't have changed a thing. So that was 30. I spent another few, and I'm making a point here. I spent another few grand on a few more seminars, 2,000, 3,000. I ended up signing up for Stefan's program. That program that I started with him was about 20,000. So between those programs, and this is before I'd ever really done deals. Like, I'm just going in. I knew something was going to stick eventually.
This is pre-deal making. So before you even touched like a single real estate listing, you're already more deep into this than most people.
Yeah. And it was like, okay, well, I have to make this work, or else it's probably going to be like I'm going to go under soon, because it was all going on credit cards too. Keep in mind, so 20% interest loans, credit cards, unsecured. So 58,000 is what I ended up racking up, like in the first couple
credit cards. Before you even did a deal.
Before. So then what ended up happening, the very first deal that I did with Stefan Arnio's program, the Bronze program, I ended up netting on, this is my very first real estate transaction. I netted 68,000 on that deal.
On your first deal.
First deal. And then I literally, I used it. So I paid off $60,000 worth of credit cards, like just in my first transaction. So, so to answer your question, so that is when the light bulb kind of went on. I said, okay, $20,000 just made me 68,000. That's a pretty good return on the investment. So how do I spend more money now to get more money in? It's kind of just like, if you trace it back, like you reap what you sow. You know, you put seeds in, you get the crops. Put the seeds in, you get the crops. What happens, and the people that you were speaking about earlier, they're not putting any seeds in, but they're looking for the crops. Like, they just don't have the education yet. So they're doing one deal. We're doing the one deal, and there's nothing wrong with doing that either. And I'm not talking down upon anybody, but that's just the difference between somebody, maybe myself as an example, that I'm doing more volume faster. And somebody
the main difference is just kind of like when you're at an amateur level versus somebody who's like sophisticated professional level, right?
Definitely.
Not to say one is better than the other. It's just one is more refined, one is more practiced, and it's just a flowing system. Whereas the other person's just kind of gunslinging, right? They're trying to figure it out as they go.
Definitely. So that's one of the main tips that I would have for people is
Invest in yourself. Invest in your
like, don't jump on a grenade and blame me for this, but this is what happened to work for me, is like, don't be afraid to take on a little bit of debt for some training, because without the training, we can't really do it. Well, we can, but it'll probably take us 10 years to do the same thing that I've done in 1 or 2 years, simply because I have somebody helping, I have resources, I have systems, this and that. And it sets you up for a lot of success. And if I never would have spent that 20, like,
who knows where your life would have taken you, right?
I would be mining still. I'm almost, well, maybe not, but like probably would still be mining right now. Would be involved with real estate investing, business, and like, it would just be a completely different situation that I'm in right now. And spending that little bit of money up front, well, I spent a lot, but you know, spending the money up front, in my opinion, is the only way to actually do this for real if people are willing to do it. And one mistake in this thing as well, like, for example, when you're flipping property, you can lose 40 or 50,000 bucks or 20,000. Like you don't check one box. Yeah, you forget to check one box. You didn't even know the box was there. You don't check it. You have like a bad purchase or something, and you just lose your shirt. And it's like, you know, you might as well have just spent a little bit of money educating yourself first. So I did that. That isn't where the education ended either. So I did that, and then as soon as that happened, I paid off the 60. Dude, I doubled down and just went.
You went and got more coaching, didn't you?
Went in again, buddy. Like I went way more in. So
right on.
I mean, that's, in my opinion, that's what people need to do.
Yeah.
You know, if they want to do this professionally, at least.
Well, it's kind of like this whole thing, right? Like, let's say I put somebody in a car and I'm like, hey, go to Toronto. I'm sure you'll figure out how to drive to Toronto from here. Yeah. But if I give you a map, you're going to get there much faster, right? The other thing, though, so, like, in terms of, like, going to these seminars, you get a lot of, like, information. For me, like, when I attend these kind of seminars or events, like, if I get even just one piece of information that I didn't already know, it's become worth it, right? Definitely. I think, though, like, outside of all of the information that's being provided, I think the biggest thing is the network, right? Yes. People who are attending these events are of a similar mindset, right? Yeah. You're not going to find somebody who's at a seminar or a networking event and has no real ambition or drive to do anything in their life, right? Yeah. And I think this is really a great way to segue into what you were talking about, how you were able to build a power team, right? Yeah. We're going to talk about what's a power team, why is that important. But one second, before we do get into that, for anybody who's watching live and you have any real estate related questions, if you ask them in the comment section of this stream on Facebook or YouTube, it'll show up on our end and we'll try and get to those. Obviously, we are running a little bit out of time. We've been going at this for 50-ish minutes now. Feels like it's been 10, but you know.
Breeze.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah. Yeah, man. So as far as the power team, in my, again, all my opinions, but we rarely exceed the quality of people that we have around us, especially if we're looking to get into a business or something. What ended up happening with the first program that I took, the $30,000 program, I had a mentor with that program, and she introduced me to some of her power team that it probably took her 20 years to find some of these top professionals. So I ended up getting sort of a little bit of an inside, introduction into some of these really, really top power team members. And when I say power team, I mean like your lawyer, your accountant, your mortgage broker, your main real estate agent. Like those are all sort of power team members. Insurance. So I ended up getting, introduced to those people, and it's very important to have those. One of the things that happened when I was first getting started, and this was before I did deals, is I put some ads out on an online classified through Rain looking for joint venture partners before I'd done deals, because I knew I was going to need.
Let's hold up here for a second, right? You're dropping terms like joint venture partner. Most people in the real world don't know what that means.
Yeah. So essentially what it is, it's just a partner that you can, partner up with to do real estate deals together. Usually there's an active partner, the guy that would be doing the flip, and then there's the money partner or the passive partner, and they're putting in money. So those two people, they come together. So when I say I'm looking for a joint venture partner, I'm looking for an investor that can give me some access to some capital to do deals. So what ended up happening, so I put an ad out on this online classified for Rain looking for joint venture partners. And then like 2 or 3 months later, somebody reached out to me that was asking me a whole bunch of questions about my business model. He's one of my bigger investors right now. And what he did, so he asked,
working with him?
I am, yeah. So he asked me a bunch of questions. We ended up having a meeting, and I did the capital raising meeting. This guy ended up being a very large developer. He lives in Vancouver. So he's taking part in over 1,000 units. And he was like a kind of a big fish investor that Stefan talks about in some of his books, landing a big fish investor. This was very early on.
And you got this just off a post.
Yeah, there was more to it than that. Like, it's also kind of a sale. Like learning sales is a huge thing. But so this was off a post initially. But what ended up happening, so we had a very good meeting. You know, he loved the model. I did a very good job. Like, I didn't have experience yet, but I was following the steps that I learned in some of these programs and just had the binder, was showing him things. The next day, he called me with about 50 questions, and he just machine gunned a bunch of questions off. So I'm like kind of buying questions. I'm like, this guy sounds like he's for real. He actually might want to be investing with me. Like, oh my God, I haven't done deals yet. The other thing that he did is he Googled me, like we were mentioning earlier, Googled me, didn't have much at the time. He also checked me out with my lawyer. We happen to have the same lawyer.
Oh.
Instant rapport. We had the same lawyer. I think that was probably the little thing that tipped the scale in my favor, because this lawyer is a really, really well-respected lawyer in the area, and a lot of bigger investors use this lawyer. So just to circle back around to the power team, having him in my power team really opened up the door for like a fairly large investor to come in, because now we were sort of on the same level, even though, you know, an even playing field, even though I wasn't really proven yet in investing. So to relate that back,
gave you kind of that extra level of credibility.
Definitely. And that was because of the power team. So the networking is super important. I think
that's so powerful though, what you just said.
Yeah.
Right. It's not necessarily you, but somebody in your power team you're able to leverage to now have that extra level of credibility.
Definitely. And people say it all the time. People will say your net worth or your network is your net worth. And that's very, very accurate. A little cliche because everybody says it, but that's a real life example of why that is so powerful, is to have a good network and have good people around you, because this guy's, you know, he's a big fish investor, and he's a very, very strong resource. A lot of people will spend years looking to partner with somebody like that.
Yeah, for a lifetime even.
Definitely. And we had the same lawyer. And it's not like I just found this and stumbled upon this lawyer. Like, I spent like 30 grand getting this education to get around these people, to have the network, to make the connection, to do the stuff and this and that. And
have access to these people.
Yeah, but I paid the tuition and cash for that. You know what I mean? I didn't just stumble. And now as well, when I'm doing deals, I have some other guys that in my circle that are doing some deals. And sometimes they think that I'm just raising capital, like it's just no big thing. And I'm like, dude, I've spent like 100 grand over the last couple of years getting around people and networking. And then relationships are super important also to make sure that you water the relationships that you already have, because those things are really going to be powerful. You can add value to them, they can add value to you, but adding value to your current relationships is also extremely important. A quick example of that. Do you want me to give you an example of that?
Yeah, definitely.
So I like to give examples, so I'm not just saying things. But an example of that, so I had a deal that I was doing with a partner, flip, and it was fairly tight margins to begin with. We were only expecting to make like 25 grand or something on this deal, which is, fairly small profit margin for a house flip. And what ended up happening, it went over budget slightly. There was a few overages that came up, and it took me long to I initially anticipated. And we were doing like a 50-50 profit split. And he was a fairly new relationship that I had, and he was a fairly new investor. And then what I decided to do, I didn't need to do this because a 50-50 profit split, you just split whatever the profit is 50-50. I ended up deciding, so I took a haircut on my own profit, even though it was a lot of work for me, right? I took a haircut on my own profit, and I still paid the investor the amount of money that he was expecting, even though it's not a haircut. That was just a projection. So I haircutted my own side, and then I loaded up his side with what he was originally anticipating. And that built the rapport for a relationship, because I'm in this for the long term, like a lifelong relationship is what I'm trying to find.
And I think really though, like you going that extra mile shows that to the other person, like, hey, I know we didn't agree to this, but if you're willing to do that for me, obviously you want to have this relationship into the future.
Definitely. And then fast forward a little bit further down the road, I had 2 properties that I was supposed to be closing on, 2 houses, 2 different sellers, both flips. The possession date just happened to be the same day. Those were 2 out of the 4 that I closed in that 1 month. And then what ended up happening is my investor backed out at the last minute. So I was in a little bit of a tough spot, because in real estate investing, if you're committed and you're almost to the possession and you have to back out, it's not the best situation. So what ended up happening is I was calling around raising some more capital. I needed just like a short-term loan to be able to close on these properties. And then that investor, he didn't really have much capacity to be investing. And then within 1 day's notice, or like within 12 hours, he wired me over everything that I needed to get these 2 houses closed. Basically like saved my behind in the situation, just because I did something to strengthen the relationship in the beginning. And then he reciprocated back by doing something to strengthen our relationship, shortly after. So the relationship game in this business, and just in business in general, is very, very important. And it goes a long way when you do things like that for your partners and for people in your network.
Yeah, no, definitely. Social capital is huge, especially when we get to this point where money no longer exists or is worth anything. It's really going to be about like how you made people feel and how they remember you, right?
Definitely.
I love this though, like, because you're talking about like you just picked up the phone and a day later you had money, no banks, no hassles, like literally that easy, right?
Yeah. And a lot of that, how much time we have left, but a lot of that again is goes back to another huge tip that I have for people that might be thinking about getting into this, is learning sales and going into a sales position.
Let's talk about this, right? High income skills, sales. This guy did 30K in 1 month in commission. So for sure, he knows what he's talking about when it comes to sales, you know?
Definitely. It's just extremely important, because the reason that I ended up moving to Winnipeg to come and work with Stefan Arnio is because he was always saying in all of his videos that if you want to have your own business and scale your own business, you need to work in a straight commission style job for 2 years to be good enough to really scale up. Like, I know a lot of investors that are doing very well. I don't know if they're ever going to scale past a certain point because they haven't learned how to sell.
Yeah.
So that's why I ended up moving out here to Winnipeg initially. And that's when I started learning about sales, because I was listening to my coach and my mentor's advice, not changing things, just following the blueprint. He knows better than I do. I need to go learn that stuff. And it really helped a lot. So for raising capital, for an example, it's a sale basically, and it's not an unethical sale. It's just letting them know the benefits of the deal and the timing and all this stuff, and just putting it into perspective and into words in a way that they can agree with it. And the same thing when you're doing things like working with real estate agents or people like that. One of the biggest challenges that I was facing when I was first getting into investing is part of the regiment that I was doing in the coaching is you call a certain amount of realtors. You're making like 50 calls a week. Yeah. And what I found happening to myself, especially because I was out west, is the realtors would just walk all over me because I didn't really know.
You were calling realtors in Winnipeg?
This was out west.
Okay.
Yeah, this was before I came to Winnipeg, but I was doing the same kind of thing. I don't do as many realtor calls these days, but that was part of the first regiment that I was on when I was going through my first program with Stefan, and I was still out west at that time. So I would find that the realtors, because they're kind of salespeople too, they would walk all over me on the calls. I wouldn't have any control. Plus, I'm kind of new. They knew that I was new just in 5 seconds, and it was difficult. And now that I've been in the sales game, I'm doing high ticket sales. So I'm selling fairly large ticket items. Like the smallest thing that I sell is typically like 20,000 all the way up to about 73,000. There's a lot that goes into that because there's a lot of stuff that comes up. There's human nature, there's fears, there's all these different things. And it's very, very good stuff that I'm selling. I'm a product of it myself. I'm a very active student in the same thing that I help people get into. So it's very ethical because I'm a living, breathing proof that this stuff works. But But now that I've been doing sales for a while, I'm finding that a lot of the real estate, my own business, all that stuff is 1000% easier. And I'm putting things together much, much faster.
Really?
So when I'm talking to a realtor on the phone, I'm in rapport that much quicker. And if they're butting with me a little bit, I'm typically absorbing their frame right away. And I'm usually dominating the calls now because sales is a very, very important skill. So I would recommend to anybody looking to get into this that Steph and Arnio said
but like,
first.
This is the thing though, right? Like, I love this idea, like, go get a sales job. So like any of the young cats who hit me up in Ottawa and they're like, yo, I'm trying to figure out what I should be doing with my life. What do you recommend, you know? And I'm telling these guys, yeah, go get a sales job at like the Brick or something. Go sell some furniture, go sell some cars, anything like this, right? But the thing is, now coronavirus is here.
Yeah.
So it's becoming a bit harder for people to sell, right? So do you still believe like in sales at that point, or do you think they should kind of focus on a different high income skill for the time being?
I think my opinion, amidst all of this corona, I think it's even more important now to start learning how to sell, in my opinion, because a lot of the stuff is phone based. A lot of the stuff you can do from home. A lot of the stuff you don't really need that much. And especially because a lot of stuff right now seems to be, and maybe even into the future, so people and businesses can eliminate their downside in the future going forward. A lot of stuff is going e-commerce. You know, a lot of stuff is going online based. A lot of stuff is happening online these days. And
so that's kind of really where my question comes from, right? So like, let's say if you were to build out this e-com store, right? Now you've got all these funnels in place and there's no real need for like, you'd pick up the phone and talk to somebody. Would you still consider that sales?
I would still consider it sales. I'm sure there's going to be some aspect of selling, but if it's all done over the computer, like I've never done anything like that. I don't really know exactly what that like entails. If it's a person talking to a person, then definitely that is sales in my opinion. If it's all happening online, like if you have an online store, that wouldn't be as much sales. That would be more like marketing.
Yeah.
And then your marketing.
Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of what I'm getting at, right? I feel like sales for sure is the most powerful high income skill. Like that's literally everything you do in life. Definitely. But I think like for most like young people these days who are like, I've noticed this. A lot of young people are just kind of shy and like timid and they don't want to like go on the phone. They'd rather just text you, right? So I feel for those people, yeah, maybe go into marketing for the time being. Once this is done, challenge yourself and go get a sales job where you have to talk to people and learn how to be on the phone and do a script, this kind of stuff, you know?
Yeah, the phone-based stuff, that's a really great point. Marketing right now too is really important because a lot of the businesses are doing that. But the sales, like real estate, especially if somebody wants to get into real estate investing, dude, it's 99% done on the phone. You're talking about offers, you're raising money, you're doing the stuff. Like for me, COVID, I was working. I'm in the office that I work out of right now. But the last week and a half, I've been doing some stuff from home. Just not because I'm really overly afraid of what's going on. It's just that I don't need to really be in an office. I'm just on a phone.
You work remotely.
I'm raising this money on the phone, like the deal that I was telling you about earlier. Like I'm raising about $984,000, and it's just all phone, email.
984,000.
Yeah,
this man's just collecting $1 million on the phone, people.
It's all phone stuff, man. Like writing offers and stuff like that. Like you're calling, doing things. It's all phone based. So especially if people are timid about being on the phone and they're a little bit shy and they're young and they're like, what do I do? Like, dude, just get on the phone and start learning how to sell something on the phone is my biggest piece of advice, because there's so many types of personalities. There's ways to get into rapport with people, and salespeople sometimes have a negative stigma also because they're swindly.
Or like there's that whole stigma of like the shady, greasy car salesman or like snake oil salesman. They're just selling you some kind of scam, right? So there is definitely that stigma where people are just do I want to be in sales? Do I want to be known as that guy?
Yeah. Like for me, for an example, if I got picked up and I got thrown across the country into like some new place and down, like if my business was gone, if everything was, what I would probably do, and this is something that I learned from my coach, I would probably pick up the phone. I would probably call every realtor that I could find, call on every property, and I would just start finding who has inventory, what their niches are, databasing them all. It's phone, figuring it out. And then probably within like a couple of months, I'd probably be making some pretty good money just because I had a phone.
I believe it.
And like,
let's pause here for a second though, right? So you just said something major. And this is part of the reason why I'm such a big proponent of people like learning skills and getting education, right?
Yeah.
This man just said if he was to now have to restart from zero, no business, no money, no nothing, just in a different city altogether, he already knows that because he knows how to use the phone, he understands real estate, and he has the skills to get deals. Within a few months, he's going to be making money again, and then boom, building a business, and now he can go to a different city, do it all over again, go to a different country, do it all over again, and just teach people how to do it, you know?
Definitely.
Oh, my days. That's crazy. Yeah. I love this.
It's all skills-based, my friend. In my it's all skills-based. Like if we don't have something that we want in any part of our life, it's usually just because we don't quite have the skills yet to get it. Like so it's all, this stuff is all skills-based. I see if somebody's having a really hard time doing something like raising capital, because it's not super easy, of course. Like it's a big,
for sure. Yeah, we've downplayed capital raising a lot this episode. It's really not that easy to pick up a phone and get $100 transferred to you, $1 million transferred to you. For
sure. Yeah, like there's a little bit to it. But if somebody isn't able to do it, it's just because they don't have the skill quite yet. If somebody's having a hard time finding a property at a discount, they just don't have the skills quite yet. If you kind of get the pattern there. So a lot of skills based. So when you have the skills, that's going back to our earlier conversation, why I'm spending so much time and money and energy on my personal development is because this is all skills based. And I'm just trying to get the skills, you know, the specific.
Are you like trying to acquire any new skills right now during the pandemic? Or are you just kind of polishing what you already got?
I'm pretty much just doing what I'm doing. I'm doing some other random courses. Like I'm still doing some other stuff that's not real estate and sales related. But the two big skills that I feel that I needed to learn, or that I'm learning right now, one of them was sales is number one. That's a very important part. I went on another business convention. It was in the Caribbean a couple months ago. And one of the things, it was about becoming more of an executive and stop operating inside of the business. The other thing there is the executive, they are doing more managing of people. So that is probably the next skill that I'm going to try to acquire at some point, as being a little bit more versed in how to properly manage people. I have the people skills. I'm very good with people. Like I do sales and all these things. So I think it'll be fairly natural to start learning. But I'm not trying to split my focus into too many things at once. So I want to do a couple of years, hardcore sales. You know, I'm doing my deals. I have my own business. I have all these, you know, flips, whatever else I'm doing. And then at some point, I'm going to flip the switch. I'm not going to just stop sales, but then I'm going to incorporate another skill in. And that next skill, figuring out where do I have to go to be able to get the knowledge of how to properly manage people. So at some point or someday, I can become more of an executive than, you know, an operator. Because right now, I'm an operator inside my business. I don't have a bunch of employees. I have lots of contractors, but I'm pretty much doing most of the stuff. So to get away from that, you know, this is a 5-year, 10-year plan. I know at some point I'm going to need to brush up.
Where you want to have the employees, everybody on payroll.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got it.
Managing. To answer your question, well, that would be the next skill that I'm probably going to learn. Right now, I'm not super focused on it. I'm just kind of my one lane.
I think you are a bit more focused than more people, though, right? Like you're getting tactical about what it is you want to learn and when you're going to learn it and why. Most people don't get that far ahead. They're just like, oh yeah. You just kind of float through life, you know. I want to ask you though, before we kind of get into our 3 pieces of advice, you know, how important is appearance in this line of work? Because this comes up so many times. And now that you've mentioned like the whole executive role and this kind of stuff, you want to talk on this a little bit? Definitely.
So appearance, in my opinion, doesn't necessarily mean that somebody has to be a super good looking, attractive kind of person. A lot of it is just sort of how you carry yourself. And I think that it's pretty important. For me, you know, if you see me right now, this is kind of like my
uniform. Got his whole suit, tie, everything on, you know?
A lot of that, there's a few different reasons that I do that. One of it is because like the way that you project yourself, it plays a pretty big role in things. Also, when you get into sales and you're doing like commission-based stuff, it's not a super easy task. So sometimes you're almost doing it just so you can be certain that you're putting on the image that you're trying to be, just so you don't get discouraged, for an example.
So you're kind of trying to trick your brain into it.
You're tricking there's things. So you're like an emotional athlete. Sometimes when you're in sales, it's like a roadblock, and okay, you didn't get the sale or this or that. And what happens with salespeople, specifically amateur salespeople, before they build those muscles, is every time they get turned down, it's like they go down. Every time they get turned down, they go down, and so on. And so the next thing you know, they're way down here, and they're like, oh, why this isn't working? But if you have a nice suit and you're looking good and you have you keep yourself clean, you're sort of tricking yourself into the image that you're trying to portray. So you're sort of like future pacing yourself into who you want to be. And it's fairly common in a lot of sales organizations. I think that's one of the main reasons why a lot of them are wearing suits. You look at, Grant Cardone videos or something. Those guys are all looking just like $1 million.
Yeah.
They need
But then, so this is the thing. If you go on YouTube and now you search somebody like Ben Mala, right? I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's down in Miami. This guy is like 200 million plus worth of real estate holdings. He walks around like everywhere, just like flip-flops, shorts, and like a Hawaiian t-shirt. And that's like his look, So a lot of people think like, oh, if you're a real estate landlord or like a real estate mogul, you don't really need to be wearing a suit and tie, etc., right? But that you see people like you or other people like who come out of Stefan's program doing real estate deals, everybody's suit and booted, right?
Yeah.
Why is that? Is it the same reasoning?
Sort of, yeah. So in my opinion, it's not always like this look that I have on now. It's not good for every situation. Like I'm kind of working, I'm doing my thing, I'm wearing this. Good, especially, I guess we talk a lot about raising capital, but it's an easy example for me because it's what I do quite a lot. But when I'm walking into a meeting with a potential investor, I'm not going to wear this. I'm going to kind of I'm going to be sharp. I might be like one notch above them or at where they're at as far as their dress. Like I just kind of think of how they're going to show up. They're not going to show up in a suit. So I sort of tailor sometimes things that I wear to the situation. If you're going to go walk through a distressed property, same thing. You don't want to look like you're a super sharp, polished. Like you
don't want to show up in a Porsche and like a $10,000 suit.
Definitely.
To buy like a $40,000 house.
And now you're authority now. And that's why they called your ad online, because they don't want authority and they don't like realtors, and the realtors are bad or evil and all this stuff. So you kind of do that. I think what happens when some people get to a certain point of success, they can go the other way. Even an example, Stefan Arnio, you don't see him really in a three-piece suit that often these days. Because he doesn't need to anymore. He has a big beard going now. Me too. He's done years and years of the suits. You look at lots of really successful people, and they used to do it, and now they don't anymore because now they've sort of achieved their version of what success is.
I guess so like just somebody like a Stefan, right? Like he's created his brand, he's got the credibility, people know who he is, and then when he talks, like it's just game over. The guy knows what he's talking about, right? So I guess that makes sense. But so for the people starting out, should they really be focused in on this? I want to say yes.
Definitely. Yeah, I think if you're just starting out, the way that you present yourself is super important. And you'll sort of morph into your own kind of like groove at some point, to your own style. But the timeless stuff, like you want to have a suit, probably, maybe not a three-piece, just get a regular suit, or you don't need a vest, just get a regular suit. Maybe like a dark navy or something. That's pretty nice. Or like charcoal, something like that. That's like not crazy flashy. It looks professional. You want to make sure they sort of tailor it, make sure it's nice and fitted. Like I don't recommend, you can get something that's nice and fitted for pretty much the same price. And then make sure everything kind of matches and kind of aligns with the image. You don't want to be showing up in a bright green suit. No, definitely. Like there's maybe one person that can pull that off in the bunch. My brother, he's a guy that can probably pull something like that off. He has a strong personality, and like they might be like, "What's going on?" for the first second, but as soon as he starts talking, they're like, "Oh, this guy's sharp," and you know what I mean. But it's not common practice. Even when I was first doing this, when I wasn't wearing a suit, I was still trying to make sure that my casual clothes were more kind of business casual-ish, because
Is that because you don't know who you're going to run into on the streets? Like, for example, you might meet somebody who saw your video and now wants to invest with you. But if you're roaming around the streets dressed like a thug, they're going to be like, wait, is it the same guy?
Definitely. Yeah, I think probably that's exactly right. The other thing too is, for me, when I was getting into this, very, very blue collar. We didn't get into my path before mining, but like, you know, learned lots of lessons, went through the ringer and did lots of stuff like that, right? Like, you know, it was a little banged up past. So then now that I was getting more into real estate and business, now I'm dressing more business casual for the same reason that I'm wearing the suit now, is I'm kind of like becoming who I want to be, not if that makes sense. So that's one of the reasons why I personally did it, because I'm like, okay, well, now I need to throw out a bunch of these clothes. I want to funnel in some newer, nice clothes. I'm like, I have no idea what my style is, so I'm just going to try to wear a bunch of this stuff. Some of them was just horrendous. I'm like, I don't know. I'm just trying things to see
trial and error.
I'm just trying to figure out who I'm going to become and things like that. So I tended to lean more towards the business casual, because if I wore my older stuff, like my older style of stuff, definitely wouldn't have put out the right impression if I was to run into somebody random. So I think, to answer your question, I think it's very important to just be well groomed, well kept. Don't wear super old, ripped stuff. But it's more so a sort of like a thermometer thing too, and that's another sales thing. As we keep our thermometer high with the suit, we're keeping our thermometer up. If I'm going to fly to Vancouver to go stay someplace or to visit or do something, I'm probably going to get a nice room that's like $500-600. Like, maybe I don't recommend everybody do this. Even if I didn't have a whole pile of cash, I would probably still go to the one room up. If I'm renting a car, I'm probably going to rent the one car up. And that's
really
contradictory.
Let's talk about this, because most people don't think like this, right? And it's kind of like a big taboo, like, ooh, why do you spend so much on a hotel? You're only there to sleep, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Again, we all have a thermometer. And what happens in sales is a perfect example. You'll have a guy come into a sales job or a sales position, and year one, he'll make 40K. And then another guy will come into the same position, the same phone, the same script, and he might make 100, 150, 200K.
Really?
Probably the difference there is one guy's thermometer was already set higher than the other guy's thermometer. Maybe he was making 40K at his other job, and he thinks that he's only worth 40. So doing little things like renting a nicer car or staying in a nicer thing, you're sort of showing yourself what is possible. And then it really just helps you to align yourself with that in the future, in my opinion. I went to the Wealth Hacker Convention, or the Wealth Hacker Conference in Toronto.
That was Grant Cardone, right?
Cardone. So I went there. We stayed in we stayed in an Airbnb. I rented us, and I brought up some of the strategists, the other sales guys with me. I rented like a nice, like S-Class Mercedes. Oh
yeah, I seen that. The videos are online.
And that was more so as more so an exercise for them. But those things are important, even if you can't afford it. Once in a while, or if you're going to go out to a convention, spend the extra 20 or 30% and get the upgraded thing, because. And that's another thing that I learned from my coach, is he used to do that.
Let me ask you this, though, since we're talking about like conferences and upgraded things, right? So 10X Growth Con, I believe their most expensive ticket is like upwards of $10,000.
Yeah.
Right. So are you of the mindset that somebody should go and buy something like that? Like, would you do that? That
also depends. It depends.
So for somebody like you.
For me, if I was going to go, I might buy the upgrade. I probably wouldn't buy the best one. An example of that is a guy that I know that helps me with my social media. He
Luke, yeah?
Luke, yeah. So he ended up doing it. I'm pretty sure they bought the upgraded thing. They spent the $5,000 or $10,000 a ticket or whatever. I don't think they really cared about being further ahead, but they wanted to stick with everybody else that bought the $10,000. Networking. Like, that probably makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
If somebody's brand new, I probably wouldn't recommend just buying the $10,000 ticket at the event. I would buy a regular ticket at the event, but I would upgrade your room. I would maybe rent a nicer car, and then you're going to get a better experience, in my opinion, because it's a little more calculated. If you have a service and you can make money there by networking, and you can sell things to people, or you can just do things like that in your business, that is a pretty good investment of spending an extra couple of $1,000 on your ticket. And maybe
or even just having like higher level relationships come out of it, right?
definitely. And a lot of those guys are the ones that are going to be looking for their specific service. So you might as well sit with those people and network if you're going to fly all the way somewhere. So it just depends on the situation. Somebody new coming in, I wouldn't recommend doing that. I would probably recommend upgrade your room though, maybe. Make a week out of it, go out, have a really nice dinner, even if you're doing it on credit cards. Like, you're going to figure it out, spend the extra couple of $500,000 and just make it.
Yeah, definitely. Like, make it a full experience, right? Like, embody yourself into everything you're doing for that weekend. Like, and this is one thing. So anytime I come out to Winnipeg for Stefan's events, like, this is what I'll go. So just for the whole weekend, I'll upgrade my flight, just kind of hang out, go meet with a few people. And then now when I come back to Ottawa, I'm just in a completely different mindset because I'm like, oh, yeah, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, right? And then however long that lasts for, right? So when I started these videos, initially every single video, if you go back on my Instagram, you'll see I'm wearing a suit in almost every video. And then somewhere along the line, like, my piercings are back in, and then now they're out, and it's just kind of been a floating. But that's kind of why I wanted to ask you about the whole appearances stuff, right? Because people ask me this all the time. Like, you're in real estate, like, does it really matter what you look like? Like, couldn't you have pink hair if you wanted? And I'm like, I could, but like, why?
Yeah, for sure. Well, you definitely can. And the way that you're presented right now, I really enjoy it because it's a little more laid back. It's still really nice. You're not dressed way up and really, really fancy. Sometimes people can kind of overdo it, in my opinion, too. So there's a little bit of a line there. You got to just kind of learn your way in the line. If you had a suit on it and looked super sharp, that'd be awesome for the show. I really enjoy this vibe because for me, it doesn't seem as formal. I don't feel like I'm sort of like under investigation here, like, answering questions to something that's like super formal. A little bit more of an organic conversation. So that's my feedback on your.
Well, the other reason was kind of because, like, so I had a few people hit me up being like, "Oh, I think you should kind of stray away from only suits in your videos because it makes it seem like real estate is like this harder thing to get into. You have to be one of these like suited, booted accountant lawyer types,
Yeah.
That was kind of my other reasoning for that. So we've kind of covered a lot today. It's been great. Awesome little info nuggets for everyone who's been tuned in. Is there anything you want to cover before I put you on the hot seat and ask for your 3 pieces of advice?
I don't know, man. I think we covered a lot of ground, I think. I mean, that hour.
Yeah, we did. So we've been going for an hour and a half. This has been my longest episode to date.
That's crazy, man. I feel like we could just keep going too, man.
I know, really. We could probably do this all day. Yeah, so if somebody does have a question before I let Damon go, if you're watching this live on Facebook, YouTube, go ahead, drop it in the comments, and I'll try and get to it. If you are watching through a watch party on Facebook, we're only going to see your comments if you comment in the actual stream, not in the watch party. But Damon, I want to ask you, if you could go back in time to meet yourself at 19 or 20, what are 3 key pieces of advice you would give yourself and why?
So the first one, that's a pretty interesting question. I'm just looking back to my 19-year-old self. Different guy, man. Different guy.
I know, right?
The first one, I would say, find somebody maybe find some kind of a mentor or somebody that you can look up to that was doing something extremely positive. That doesn't necessarily mean it would have had to be like a real estate investor or business. Like, I wasn't interested in that at all, but I had a little bit of a colorful kind of background. So when I was around 19, I looked up to the wrong kind of people, I think that's pretty straightforward. So the people I looked up to weren't the best kind of people. What I would say is try to find somebody that I connect with that was doing stuff that was a little more positive and just start to slowly shift into a little bit more positive environment and mindset. It's a kind of a hard question to ask because going back and giving myself advice, I don't think that I think if I didn't do what I did and what I mean? I would be doing what I'm doing now.
This guy just threw me a curveball.
I wouldn't change a single thing about it, realistically. So if I was to give myself advice back then, I would probably.
Let me edit your question for you then, right? Yeah. So let's say not give yourself the advice, but anyone else who's out here watching who may have had a similar lifestyle or past, or is just kind of lost in life and they're 19 or 20, they don't know what to do with life. What do you have to say for those folks?
Yeah.
So find a mentor. That's for sure vital.
For sure. Yeah. So I would say and I touched on it earlier, don't be afraid to take on a little bit of debt to get a little bit of specialized training in something. In my opinion, real estate investing is a very, very good thing. So don't be afraid to take on a little bit of debt. Like go to the seminar. That 2 or 3 hour long seminar that I ran you guys through earlier, that happened to be free. But if I would have paid a couple $100 for that, that like literally probably changed my life in 2 or 3 hours. So the first piece of advice, don't be afraid to spend a little bit of money, even if you don't have it. Don't be super afraid of debt as long as it's going to give you what you need as far as some skills. That would be the first one.
Obviously, though, use debt sensibly. Like, don't go out and put like $40,000 on your credit card with no plan to pay it back.
100%. Yeah. So don't do that for sure. The second thing that I would recommend is I would start thinking about getting into some kind of sales job. That is a huge, huge, huge one. A couple of books I could recommend for that. I don't know if that's of interest to anybody. The first one that I would recommend, it's a pretty easy read that really impacted me when I was going into sales. It's called Pitch Anything. It's by Oren Klaff. That is a very, very good book. The other one that I would recommend, it's sort of the stuff that I do when I'm selling in my sales position. The book is called The Close 7-Level Selling. My mentor wrote that book, and it's a very, very powerful book for selling. So I would recommend those 2 books for anybody that wants to learn a little bit more about sales before they maybe like drop what they're doing and like go get a sales job. But a sales position would be definitely way up there. The third one I would say is probably you need to get skills for this. These all kind of tie together. So you need to get skills. So I would figure out what it is, that you want to do, and then I would get the very specialized skills to be able to do that. Sales is a blanket. Like there's probably other skills that you can get as well, depending on where you want to go with yourself. So that would be another.
I guess figuring out where you want to go and then getting the right skills to get there.
Definitely, yeah. And the specialized skills is super important. Another one, like kind of, they all morph together, kind of. But get around good people and get rid of bad people.
But then okay, let's pause here for a second. Because this is one of those things, like, how do you determine who's a good person and who's a bad person, right? And then let's say, like, what if I've been family friends with this person. He's kind of like a brother to me. I've known him since I was like 1 year old. But the guy's super lazy, doesn't want to do anything, is just into having a good time, doesn't listen. But at the end, like, that guy's got your back. Like, if you were ever to be like, yo, I'm in trouble, I need you to help get me, that person will be there, right? But how do you now determine, like, should you be hanging out with somebody like that or not, right?
That's a great question. So there's a lot of people, especially if you're in that kind of situation right now, it's very hard to get out. I have certain contacts that are exactly like that, because when you're doing something that's not so positive, things like loyalty and all that stuff is super, super important. So if you have somebody that's there and they have your back, like they really, really have your back, like they will be there just because that's sort of like more of like that kind of culture. What I did is I still know, so like I didn't completely sever ties with some of these people. Some of them I did. Like some of them you can clean out and just get rid of them. Like nothing positive is ever going to come from that relationship. You're going in a different.
But like, wouldn't it be your responsibility though? Like, if you've been friends with that person for like 10 years and they're headed down the wrong path, like, shouldn't you kind of be like, hey, look, guy, come onto this path?
Definitely. If you can, and I've done this with a few of my friends in the past, trying to give them a point in the right direction, that's very, very good for you to do that, especially if it's a close friend. But it comes to a point, a lot of people that are going down the wrong path, no matter what you personally say to them, it's not going to really change their trajectory to go the other way. They're too deep in. Their conditioning is too strong. So what I would recommend is you can do what you can to try to get them pointed in the right direction, but learn how to cut your losses fast. If it's just very evident that they're not going to be able to do it, I would recommend just get away from these people, because those people are going to just keep you down. And even if it's a situation, like let's say you don't talk to them for 2 or 3 years, and then 3 years later they pop up out of nowhere and they're like, oh, hey, to reconnect, that weekend can destroy the rest of what you're trying to do and what you've been trying to do for the last 2 or 3 years. So putting yourself back into that position, even if it's years down the road, you can literally cancel all the hard work that you put in up until that point. So my recommendation would be, if you can't sway them to the right direction quickly, what I've done is I just cut ties. Sorry, we're going on different paths. Love you. You know, cross the street if you see me. We're not.
There's some real courage to do that, though, right? Especially if you've been like friends with the person for so long.
It does, yeah. And I've learned that, you know, up until this point. It's pretty difficult.
But that's the thing, though, right? I'm assuming if you're able to kind of take that first step and cut off all these negative influences, that makes room now for better influences to come into your life, right? So if you got some bad friends, get rid of them. Maybe Damon will come into your life.
Definitely, yeah. Well, I'm always open for new contacts and relationships. So that would be that's a really strong point for me, is those people at some point, they will become more of a, you know, detriment to what you're doing. And the relationships and the loyalty and all that stuff. I mean, you know, you just got to ask yourself what's more important, the old relationship or where you want to go into the future.
I think it goes one step further than that, right? Like, yeah, it's great to be loyal, but like, you don't want to be loyal to the wrong people.
Definitely.
Right? If you know that like this one person is a big drug dealer and he's gonna get caught and go to jail, you don't want to be loyal to that person, even if you've known them for 5, 10, 20 years. That's how you're gonna end up in jail, right?
Definitely. Or just up sometime. Like maybe they'll poke their head into your reality like a year later. That weekend is where you'll probably get jammed up. You know, like it's just not. It's not worth
that one little slip up and everything you've worked for down the drain.
Definitely. So it's just self-preservation. It sounds a little selfish if they've been close, but just out with the old, in with the new.
Being mindful of that. Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, thank you for joining, man. We've been going at this for about an hour 40 now. We really could be doing this all day. Like anytime I'm with Damon in Winnipeg, we have great conversations. Awesome dude. Same with really all of the Black Card staff. Like these guys are just all around awesome people. Stefan, of course, amazing dude. Yeah. So let's go about this. I think now we're gonna start to wrap up. I've got all the advice from Damon. I'm gonna go ahead and tag Damon on Instagram, Facebook, etc. This is one of the main guys in Canadian real estate who's really making waves. When you hear people talking about real estate investments and real estate training, it's mostly American. You don't really see anybody in the Canadian space or let alone somebody who actually is doing it, right? So feel free, hit them up. Check out Black Card. These guys are phenomenal. I'm going to tag all of this stuff in the comments. And without further ado, Damon, you want to say anything before I let you go?
I think we pretty much covered everything, man. I really appreciate coming on to the show. Like you just said, I really love chopping it up with you, man. We could definitely do this all day. If anybody has any other questions for me outside of this, then I'm sure that you can connect us or you can get the information.
Definitely.
Or I'll be tagged to some of the stuff. But yeah, other than that, I hopefully, you know,
what kind of stuff are people able to hit you up for? If they've got real estate questions, sales questions, anything else?
Definitely. Yeah. Real estate questions, sales questions, just anything in general. Like if you have questions about some of the stuff that we chat about on this call, definitely don't be a stranger. Like I might take a day or two to reply or something, but I'm usually fairly open. You know, I for the most part, run most of my own stuff through Instagram, my own DMs and things like that. So if anybody has questions, yeah, definitely don't be a stranger. Don't be afraid to reach out. And again, I really appreciate the invite to come on the show here.
Been great. I'm sure we'll have you on at some point again in the near future. Maybe we'll get you to bring Stefan on with you. Maybe we'll get the whole Black Card team up in here. Who knows?
Yeah, we would love that. Yeah, you betcha, buddy.
Cool. All right, man. Stay safe, and we'll see you probably in December for that marketing class.
Sounds awesome, my friend. Looking forward to it.
Cheers, bro.
Cheers.
Yeah, so that's been our longest episode to date. We've covered a lot. Damon is full of great knowledge and insights. Be sure to check him out. Give him a follow. Give him a like. All that great stuff. Hit him up on YouTube as well. Check out some of his videos. We're not going to be coming on tomorrow. We're back on the 24th with Hamza Huck. So anybody from the Pakistani community in Ottawa, you've definitely heard this name. recently featured on CTV's Transplant. He was on Quantico. He was on Indian Detective. He's been in a few shows, right? So we're going to be talking with him. And in terms of today's episode, if you need advice on anything real estate related, a lot of this stuff that I've used to kind of build up my own knowledge comes from Black Card, and the stuff that Stefan is using, the stuff Damon's using. If you go back, you'll see a lot of our heavy hitter real estate investors on this show have been through those programs or are in those programs. So it's definitely something you're going to want to check out while you're in quarantine, you know. And that's it for today. I'll see you guys on the 24th. Shout out to everyone who joined us, everyone who's watching the stream. And if you missed the stream while you're enjoying this on replay, cheers.